fact is, the key to the future of this nation is about creation, about creating the worth, about creating the wealth. It's not about marching and protesting, it's about creating more. Now, I suspect that it's highly moral for a Christian democracy to redistribute wealth. I suspect it's highly immoral to distribute what we haven't even created. It is all about creating the wherewithal. And the greatest challenge in creating the wherewithal in the last 20 years of the 20th century in this country is the ability to get people going. We're exceedingly good in facing the financial challenge and the technical challenge. Our real problem is, how do we set people alight? And then, of course, a whole lot of work is repetitive and mundane. There are many people in the last decade who thought by enriching jobs you could make all jobs fascinating. Life's not like that. I started as a clerk in ACL on the commercial side, and we had to get back nitrocellulose drums in Glasgow. That was a pretty boring job for 3 whole terrible years, but somebody had to do it, and I had a wife and children, and that was what you had to do. But you copied out invoices into ledgers. I hope that in my lifetime they'd abolish jobs like that. They have. It's been replaced by a girl punching it at 22,000 impressions an hour into a computer. The new job is worse to motivate, not better, than the one it replaced. But that is the nature of work. It's no good saying it'll all be interesting. That is the way it is. There's got to be shift work. It's got to be difficult hours. There will always be work of that kind. But at the same time that the work remains the same, the third challenge is that people's expectation gets higher and higher. It seems to me we have all these challenges. And there's no point to bemoaning the situation. That's the nature of the challenge. And the question is, therefore, what are we going to do about it? Because the whole future depends on getting people's commitment to creative work. Well, where are the answers now? We in the industrial society have 16,000 member companies. We're a self-financing body. And as we go around industry and have some 45,000 odd people on courses and conferences each year, we just notice that certain things seem to work better than others. And all these things are blinding glimpses of common sense. But like so much common sense, it's not common until somebody points it out and reminds one of them. The key word, we think, is the word involvement. The involvement of people at work. Not the word which was so fashionable 10 years in the last decade of participation. Getting people to participate, but getting people involved. And you may well say, what is the difference between participation and involvement? And you appreciate that involvement is infinitely greater than participation, because in involvement you have to go away and do something about it. Everybody wants to participate and argue about what the managing director is going to do about it, or the union, or the government, or somebody else themselves. The one right of free men and women is to talk about what we're going to do about it, and then go away and do it. So if we now look to action, we notice that the most important single thing about involvement is who is the involver. And this, therefore, is about structuring the business for leaders. Who's in charge? Not who's in charge at the top. Everybody knows who that is, and every time McKinsey comes, it's clearly a bit different. It's not about who's in charge at the top. It's about who's in charge at the bottom. Who's the corporal? Who's the team leader? This came home to me so vividly at a chocolate factory in Ireland the other day when I was asked by the chairman to come and look into this problem of absenteeism, 22% absenteeism. And he said, would you come and look into the problem? I said, no fear, but I'd like to look into the answers, and that's a very important point. One of the things we suffer from in this country is paralysis by analysis. We have a problem, and by the time we've analysed it, we're broken men. What we actually need to do is to think about what are the answers. And so he said, well, what would you like to do? So I said, is there any section in which the absenteeism is lower? Yes, he said, one section in which it's only 6.5%. No. The next question is, what is the name of the supervisor in that section? And the answer was Mary Macara. And I said, in that case, Chairman, take me to her, and we shall hear the answers. So I said, Mary, I gather you have lower absenteeism than anywhere else in the works. Yes, she said 6.5%. She knew. One of the very few supervisors who actually know what their absenteeism is, even though absenteeism may be a problem at the top. So I said, well, Mary, what is it you do? She said, I don't do anything. I'm lucky, I've got good girls. She said, no, you haven't, Mary, you've got the same girls as anybody else has got. She She said, well, I don't do anything. So I said, well, I'll ask her some questions. And I said, do you ever talk to your girls about the importance of what they're doing? Just wrapping up chocolate like everybody else. And she said, well, of course. Every Friday evening I take out 13 minutes of clean-up time to talk about what we've achieved this week and what we're going to achieve next week. What about if they're off ill, Mary? Did you send them to the personnel department? Send them to the personnel department. She said, what the hell's it got to do with the personnel department? Those are my girls. And if I can't get those girls to come to work, how can I get work out of them? That's my job. The most important single person is who's in charge at the bottom. And one of the first things we have to look into our companies is, does everybody know who that is? And you might well say, yes, it's the departmental head. But just a minute. How many people can one person be in charge of when there are no sticks and no carrots? In a police state, you can just oversee and you can thump them if they don't do things. But in a free situation, how many people can you call forth the gifts from? Just how many people can you involve? You see, we talk a lot about team spirit, and then we forget about the importance of the size of teams. We used to talk about the ICI team, but I can't remember a team with 115,000 players aside. We used to talk about the ICI family, but I can't remember a family with 115,000 children. Those are non-realities. Surely the largest team anybody's ever played in is 15, except the Australians who say 18, and of course that explains why they beat us at rugby football. But even with 15, if you remember rightly, if you win the match, we're a happy team. But if we lose it, the forwards play in the backs play in the forwards. 11, welded into a team. People say, but it depends on the personality of the leader. And then I never cease to reflect on the fact that if he who some of us would consider was the Son of God chose only to involve 12 people, what makes you and I think we can do better? I always wondered why he didn't have 3 deputies in the council of 60. But he didn't. He had 12 chaps, and he knew a thing or two about changing the world and involving people. Our experience is if anybody today is in charge of more than 15 people, it can't be done. Breaking people down into teams. I suspect the crucial concept of teams. A great chartered accountant in this city, vast London office. Talk to the audit clerks, who's your boss? They say, well, it depends which week it is. Depends which audit supervisor I'm working under. Fascinating, but there's a partner way up here somewhere involved with many more than 12 people. Fascinating to see that they have said, no, to every audit supervisor, look, these 10 lads are yours. Smith, Jones, Brown. They won't work for you very often because they'll work for all sorts of different, but these are your boys. And if they give their best to this chartered accountancy, that's your credit. And if we lose them or they give their worst or don't contribute their best, that's nobody's fault but yours. They're your boys. The importance of breaking people down into teams. And do we make clear as well the leadership responsibilities for that person? Action 1, therefore, was structure. Action 2. Have the leaders had some instruction, leadership instruction, in what leaders need to do, not what leaders need to be? Do they know what they need to do? People say today, but how can I be in charge of people if I can't sack them? What a fantastic concept, that leadership involves sacking people. Do people actually know what you do any longer? Or are people now in a very great muddle? Do they realize that it's not about being kind to people? It is not either or. I suppose I learnt this so vividly with Norman MacLeod, who's now the president of ICI Japan. When I was watching MacLeod at work at Welwyn Garden City, wherever MacLeod worked, people really got going. When he was running a part of a research department, they actually invented something, which I've never known a research department ever to do. I thought it was part of the overheads. But they actually got him going. When he was in techno-commercial, he actually got them to work, and he got the lights to burn at night. People worked all through the night. When he took over a plant on the northeast coast, it turned from being in the red to being in the black. Now, I thought that as a result of this unbelievable ability to get people going, people would send chits to me as the personnel manager of the plastics division, asking to move out of MacLeod's department because he exploited them. What changed my life and caused me to be here at this very moment is in the whole of those 3 years, I never ceased to get chits from people asking to move into MacLeod's department. Because working for MacLeod was fun. MacLeod set you alight. MacLeod got you going. MacLeod believed in you. MacLeod delegated you. MacLeod made you achieve things you didn't think you could achieve before. And so one searched about for some means of training leaders which reflected that fact of life. Not, are you good with people or are you good with things, because that's not what it's about. And one found a man called John Garnett at Sandhurst this wonderfully simple concept that it was the job of the leader to achieve the task, to build the team, and to develop individuals. What have I done today to achieve the task? What have I done today to build the team? What have I done today to develop individuals? These are overlapping. It's not an either or. The very best way of bringing the team together is to go all out on the task. It is not the best way to get the team together to explain the team to each other. All that concept of T groups and sensitivity training, about trying to understand the other man, I suspect is totally unrealistic. If you want to get people to work together, then it's you work together for a common purpose by stressing the importance of the team. First of all, on that card, if you've got it in front of you, item 4. Set targets for people. Tell them what we expect of them and review performance. People just work harder if they know how they are doing. Unbelievable, simple fact. Does everybody have simple targets? On the sales side, we've known this for years. We've set people targets on what they sell. But have they got man management targets? If that's the role of the leader, I want you to bring your team together every month for 20 minutes. Because one of the things I require of you. I want to be certain that you set targets for the people below you. I want you to have a go at the chaps who break the rules and are off sick. Is it actually done? Does somebody know that's what we want of them? That every person off ill we hold him personally accountable for? Everybody who doesn't commit himself? Is that clear? Secondly, do they know that one should delegate to individuals but never to groups? You can't hold a group accountable. Do they know that? And if you're not going to delegate to an individual, then consult those affected before you decide. But consultation is not compromise. Having asked people their view, one then weighs up against one's experience, and one's responsibilities upwards, and one's responsibilities sideways, what needs to be done. And then you do what you believe to be right, which is frequently exactly the opposite to what people have said. And of course, you are then accused of not being sincere. Well, lesson number 3 of being a leader is one can't have a salary and a round of applause as well. It is not about a popularity contest. Do people know that? Do they actually know the unbelievably simple points? Do they know any longer, item 6 and 7 on the card, about supporting decisions that are taken from above, whether they agree with it or not, once the decision has been taken? Do they know that? One of the terrible things, young man, about being in charge of people is not putting over to them the things you agree with, but putting over to them the things you don't. And if you're not prepared to do that, it's terribly simple. And I admire you immensely for your principles. It's quite simple what you do. You just resign and go home and tell your wife and kids you've done it. It's the second bit which is rough. But you can't take the money and not do the job. Action 4. We must be more effective in communication of what we are trying to do to our people through our agents, managers and supervisors. We are very much in the field of persuasion, of persuading people that the job is absolutely crucial. Furthermore, if I'm to give of my best, I must know what is happening and why. Only walking a city company this morning, stopping with somebody and saying, how did we do last month? Today is the 2nd of April. Was March a good month? They said, we only work here. But do people actually know how we did last month? How can one have this sense of urgency? What is for sure is you cannot do it through the grapevine. The grapevine will only denigrate the reasons behind things, will only destroy. And anybody who transmits on the grapevine doesn't realize what they're doing. You listen on the grapevine, always listen on the grapevine. Oh my God, yes, you want to be tuned into the grapevine. But only to reply through a channel which one can hold accountable And what is the way of getting the communication thing to really begin to work? How was it that fiberglass at St. Helens were able to communicate change and get it through? Because they had a drill which had been running for 2 years, which had credibility. And the drill has in it 5 crucial factors. It must be face to face. You've got to see them to sell them. You can't win the minds and hearts of men on paper. There's a place for paper. It's only in questions and answers that people understand. It must be done by the leader of the team. It cannot be done by the staff representative or by the shop steward. This belief that because I've told the shop steward, I've told the men, is the great fallacy of the last 20 years. The shop steward is not the representative of the management to the men. He's the representative of the men to management. He is the crucial man. The representative on the staff is the crucial man in upward communication. Your and my representative down to the team is the section leader, the foreman, the divisional leader. It must be done by him. It's he who communicates. It's he who leads. If we want this person to be in charge, then he must know as much as what is on our mind, if not more, than does the representative. If the representative tries to put over our view, then he gets labelled as a management man and loses his credibility and isn't re-elected as a shop steward or as a representative. Thirdly, it must be in teams. The most powerful means of communicating to people is not individually, it is in a team. The most powerful teaching mechanism known to man is the group tutorial, not individual tuition. And fourthly, it must be regular. Credibility is regularity. It will only work if it's regular. And the minimum regularity today is once a month. This comes home so again vividly. If you try to get into Marks and Spencer's on any morning at 9 o'clock, you will, except on Tuesday mornings. And on Tuesday mornings they lock us out. We say they must be mad locking us out till 9:30. What could they be doing? And we peer through the doors. And there we see the section leaders with the men and women around them, going over last Saturday's takings, next Saturday's targets, temporaries over Easter, what you and I call shoplifting and they call stock shrinkage. But all the problems of the operation. And you can see something of the commitment of people in Marks and Spencer's to selling. Unlike stores in whose names we need not mention. I was in one of the stores whose names we need not mention the other day, and I was trying to buy white shirts to go off do something overseas. And I said to the girl behind the counter, I can't find a size 17 here. I wonder if there is one. She said, if you can't find one, there can't be, can there? So I said, well, I don't think there are any here. Do you think you'd look for me? She said, I'm not here to look for shirts. I'm just here to sell them. So I said, well, I don't think there are any here, dear. Do you think there are any in the stockroom? She said, what's in the stockroom is not my business. Now, that particular store has got so upset about the lack of commitment of people on their cutting edge that they're now prepared to do anything. And that they've seen that the more effective shops shut for half an hour each week. So now they shut for half an hour each week, but they haven't discovered why you shut for half an hour. So they've learnt the tune, but they haven't understood the words yet. They need to do it regularly, not just as and when. And fifth and lastly, it must be relevant. It's not about telling people in London what's happening in Australia. It's about telling people in this department what's happening in this department and how we're doing. The 4 great P's of community of briefing. Team briefing. Progress. How are we doing? Were we 10% up or 10% down? Did we have more calls or less calls? How many complaints did we have? How many praises did we have? What did we achieve? People. Who's coming? Who's going? How many people were absent? Policy. Is there anything from on high? And sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. Team briefing is not about cascade. It's not about cascading things. You can use it for cascading. But most of the things that people need to have explained to them do not need to be cascaded from the very top to the very bottom. And anyway, they don't come once a month on any regular basis. What happens in large organizations is that there are no decisions taken at the top that affect people at the bottom for 7 months. And then 3 come in a week. But you can't make that credible. Because if the only times you communicate is at that period, then nobody believes us. One has to therefore regularly, there's policy if there is policy. And then there are any other points. The need to get people to take notes. I suppose tight team briefing, which is no more than common sense turned into a drill, is quite crucial. And action 4, the need for realistic participation. Surely it's not a question of our right to talk to our employees about our views. It is our duty to talk to our employees direct about our views. But I suspect the cause, if the cause is just, we need have no fear. But the cause alone is not enough. It's the bringing home to everybody who manages and supervises throughout the nation that this is their moment of destiny. Nelson had his day, and Drake had his day. But if the greatness which is there in the British people is to be brought back, called forth, that's not going to be done by the politicians who can be switched off for the two Ronnies. It's not going to be done by making laws. It's not going to be done by teachers, as these people are past teaching age. It's not going to be done by trades union leaders because people don't go to the meetings. It's not going to be done by priests because people don't go to church, although it's getting better, thank God. I suspect the people who are going to bring back the greatness to this nation are those of us who employ people, who manage people, as section leaders, as foremen, as middle managers, as senior managers. Because it's you and I that have people round us 35 to 40 hours a week. We have the ability to win men's minds and hearts as no one else does. If only we will do these practical things and never, ever give up hope. Well, thank you. What needs to be done, and then you do what you believe to be right, which is frequently exactly the opposite to what people have said. And of course you are then accused of not a salary and a round of applause as well. It is not about a popularity contest. Do people know that? Do they actually know the unbelievably simple points? Do they know any longer, item 6 and 7 on the card, about supporting decisions that are taken from above, whether they agree with it or not, once the decision has been taken? Do they know that? This came home to me, the amazing misunderstanding about this came home to me so vividly at Dartmouth. When talking to the cadets, I talk to the cadets each November, 300 cadets, cadet officers, and I was putting over some of these points, and a young man standing over there with one stripe on his arm, a sub-lieutenant, got up and said to me, "Are you telling me that if the commanding officer of my ship takes a decision with which I disagree, that I have to put that over to my sailors and support it with enthusiasm?" He said, "You must be joking." I thought the captain of Dartmouth was going to have a fit. Mutiny. The whole thing's finished. Navy all gone, Nelson in one, all over. So I said, "Well, young man, I think that's a very courageous question to have asked, and I hope it won't damage your career in the service permanently by having asked it. But at least you've had the guts to ask it, which is more than anybody else in this room has, because every other of these young men in this room believe what you believe. Because although you have a stripe on your arm, that doesn't mean you've been to sea anymore. That means you've been to the university, where you've seen the teachers side with the students in rebellion against the paymasters. So it's not surprising that's what you think. But may I just take you through the point? The one right people have at the bottom, who have to do things they don't much like, and that's what life's about, doing things we don't much like, and then 3 months later being pleased we were made to do it. The one right you have is to kick your boss. If your boss says, "Don't blame me, brothers, I'm on your side, it's them," and what's more, I'll give you 9 other reasons why the decision was even worse than you think it was, then that perfectly normal feeling of frustration in people who have to do things they don't much like can then only break out in anarchy or trades unionism of the very worst sort. One of the terrible things, young man, about being in charge of people is not putting over to them the things you agree with, but putting over to them the things you don't. And if you're not prepared to do that, it's terribly simple, and I admire you immensely for your principles. It's quite simple what you do. You just resign and go home and tell your wife and kids you've done it. It's the second bit which is rough, but you can't take the money and not do the job. And he said, "You know, nobody's ever told me that before. That makes sense to me. I'll do that in future." At which the captain of Dartmouth relaxed. Do people actually know these terribly simple things? Or does the business school say it's all about planning? If I may say so, it's nothing to do with planning. Anybody can plan. The problem is to make anybody carry out the plan. That's what the problem's about. It's not about making the budget. It's about achieving the budget. That's what it's about. It's about getting people to do things. Do they know about the importance of walking the job? Item 10. Of walking round the place of work. I was at Smith's, the crane makers at Rodley the other day, and a chap waved to me to come over, so I had a talk with him, and he said, we used to be run by the Crowthers of Bank Dam here. So I said, what the hell does that mean? He said, they were a lot of arrogant pigs, he said, but it was much more human in those days. So I said, well, what does that mean? He said, well, do you know the arrogant pig was in front of my machine at 20 to 9 every morning, and if it wasn't 20 to 9, I'd got my watch on. He said, nowadays we never see him. Always at meetings, always looking at the computer return, always planning, always thinking about something else. Never see him at all nowadays. Do people actually know that one has to mark off in one's diary the importance of walking the job? The chairman of Ford's, the Albert Hall, in front of the Institute of Directors last month, said, if you're not familiar with the work of the Industrial Society on the subject of leadership, can I recommend it to you? I believe what it is promoting is absolutely essential to our future prosperity. The enormous importance of simple input on what leaders need to do. Action 4. We must be more effective in communication of what we are trying to do to our people through our agents, managers and supervisors. We are very much in the field of persuasion, of persuading people that the job is absolutely crucial. Furthermore, if I'm to give of my best, I must know what is happening and why. Only walking a city company this morning, stopping with somebody and saying, how did we do last month? Today is the 2nd of April. Was March a good month? They said, we only work here. But do people actually know how we did last month? How can one have this sense of urgency? What is for sure is you cannot do it through the grapevine. The grapevine will only denigrate the reasons behind things, will only destroy. And anybody who transmits on the grapevine doesn't realize what they're doing. You listen on the grapevine, always listen on the grapevine. Oh my God, yes, you want to be tuned into the grapevine. But only to reply through a channel which one can hold accountable. And what is the way of getting the communication thing to really begin to work? How was it that fiberglass at St. Helens were able to communicate change and get it through? Because they had a drill which had been running for 2 years, which had credibility. And the drill has in it 5 crucial factors. It must be face to face. You've got to see them to sell them. You can't win the minds and hearts of men on paper. There's a place for paper. It's only in questions and answers that people understand. It must be done by the leader of the team. It cannot be done by the staff representative or by the shop steward. This belief that because I've told the shop steward, I've told the men, is the great fallacy of the last 20 years. The shop steward is not the representative of the management to the men. He's the representative of the men to management. He is the crucial man. The representative on the staff is the crucial man in upward communication. Your and my representative down to the team is the section leader, the foreman, the divisional leader. It must be done by him. It's he who communicates. It's he who leads. If we want this person to be in charge, then he must know as much as what is on our mind, if not more, than does the representative. If the representative tries to put over our view, then he gets labelled as a management man and loses his credibility and isn't re-elected as a shop steward or as a representative. Thirdly, it must be in teams. The most powerful means of communicating to people is not individually, it is in a team. The most powerful teaching mechanism known to man is the group tutorial, not individual tuition. This came home to me so vividly. I remember in Amsterdam when Sir Dennis Hamilton, the editor-in-chief of the Times, was taking the chair 8 years ago in February. And when I was talking about the importance of, at every level, people bringing the team together around them, between 4 and 18 people, the team, not the group, the team. He jumped to his feet and said, I must interrupt the speaker now, because it's an amazing coincidence. I must interrupt the speaker now and report on a discussion I had in Peking last week with Chairman Mao. That was 8 years ago. Well, I don't normally get interruptions like that. I mean, has anybody here met anybody who's met Chairman Mao? There you are. This fellow, Hamilton, had interviewed Chairman Mao in the previous week on behalf of the London Times. He said, this is an amazing coincidence, because I had one question for the London Times at this press conference, and I asked, tell me, Chairman, what is the most important single thing you did in China to achieve the change? Was it the Little Red Book? Because that's what we'd heard so much about in UK. And Chairman Mao said, no, it was not the Little Red Book. The most important single thing I did to achieve the change in China was that I required all citizens of an adult age in China to meet together in groups of between 4 and 12 people once a month for 3 years with a discussion leader I could hold accountable to discuss the change in China. That's how I achieved the change in China. I said confirmation comes from some most unfortunate quarters. And fourthly, it must be regular. Credibility is regularity. It will only work if it's regular. And the minimum regularity day is once a month. This comes home so again vividly. If you try to get into Marks and Spencer's on any morning at 9 o'clock, you will, except on Tuesday mornings. And on Tuesday mornings they lock us out. We say they must be mad knocking us out till 9:30. What could they be doing? And we peer through the doors. And there we see the section leaders with the men and women around them, going over our Saturday's takings, next Saturday's targets, temporaries over Easter, what you and I call shoplifting and they call stock shrinkage. But all the problems of the operation. And you can see something of the commitment of people in Marks and Spencer to selling. Unlike stores in whose names we need not mention. I was in one of the stores whose names we need not mention the other day, and I was trying to buy white shirts to go off to do something overseas, and I said to the girl behind the counter, I can't find a size 17 here, I wonder if there is one. She said, if you can't find one, there can't be, can there? So I said, well, I don't think there are any here, do you think you'd look for me? She said, I'm not here to look for shirts, I'm just here to sell them. So I said, well, I don't think there are any here, dear. Do you think there are any in the stockroom? She said, what's in the stockroom? It's not my business. Now, that particular store has got so upset about the lack of commitment of people on their cutting edge that they're now prepared to do anything. And that they've seen that the more effective shops shut for half an hour each week, so now they shut for half an hour each week, but they haven't discovered why you shut for half an hour. So they've learnt the tune, but they haven't understood the words yet. They need to do it regularly, not just as and when. And fifth and lastly, it must be relevant. It's not about telling people in London what's happening in Australia. It's about telling people in this department what's happening in this department and how we're doing. The 4 great P's of community of briefing. Team briefing. Progress. How are we doing? Were we 10% up or 10% down? Do we have more calls or less calls? How many complaints did we have? How many praises did we have? What did we achieve? People. Who's coming? Who's going? How many people were absent? Policy. Is there anything from on high? And sometimes there is and sometimes there isn't. Team briefing is not about cascade. It's not about cascading things. You can use it for cascading. But most of the things that people need to explain to them do not need to be cascaded from the very top to the very bottom. And anyway, they don't come once a month on any regular basis. What happens in large organizations is that there are no decisions taken at the top that affect people at the bottom for 7 months. And then 3 come in a week. But you can't make that credible. Because if the only times you communicate is at that period, then nobody believes us. There has to, therefore, regularly, there's policy if there is policy. And then there are any other points. The need to get people to take notes. I suppose a tight team briefing, which is no more than common sense turned into a drill, is quite crucial. And action 4, the need for realistic participation. We all know that the mouthings by theorists of the 60s, much of it was very, very far-fetched and totally untested. Workers on the board, totally untried, and appears to be quite irrelevant to people's problems. That does not mean, and there's a danger of reacting too far the other way, that there are some things which aren't tested with 50 years of experience. And those are 2 things. One is, in organizations of more than 100 people, consultative efficiency committees, where the boss man of the unit is in the chair and representatives come together to talk about how we can do the job better, not to take decisions. Do we have such things? And is 70% of the time of the agenda spent on asking, not on lavatories and canteens, but in asking people how we can be more effective? How can we use the gifts of women better? Have we got the right office equipment? Have we got enough tied telephone lines? What's the better way of doing things in the works? Pilkingtons, Reckitt and Coleman's, 70 years experience. Nothing new, things which is well experienced. And the other great way of participating is where unions are recognized through unions. Now, in companies which recognize unions, do we encourage people to participate in the union? Do we encourage them to go to the meetings and speak up for what they believe is right? Surely all life is that evil takes place because men of goodwill do nothing. It does not take place because evil is true. Do we get our middle managers to put over our view to our people and then say to them, go and vote for it? I'll never forget Foreman Morgan 25 years ago, walking the job in Yorkshire and saying to his shift, important meeting of the union tonight, lads. You'll all be there. All my shift will be there. I wouldn't know whether any other shifts will be there, but my boys will be there, and I'll be on your backs in the morning. If you're not there, I've got my spies. And while you're at the meeting, I want you to vote for the following 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody laughs today. Says, isn't that interfering with union business? Good gracious me, aren't the trades union discussing our business? Does freedom and democracy and participation mean that only one side does all the talking? Surely it's not a question of our right to talk to our employees about our views. It is our duty to talk to our employees direct about our views and say go and vote for them. We can't make them. They're free men. But by Jove, they need to go into bat as never before. Not to tell the union, tell the union, negotiate with the union where unions are recognized, but tell the members who you and I employ 37 hours a week. And finally, there is, if we are to get people to commit themselves to the task as never before, there is a need to achieve a sense of common purpose. We know what divides us. Free men are divided. Some have one view and some have another, you and I at management. But what's the common purpose that binds us together? Nick Feather, the last chairman of the General Secretary of the TUC, said before he died to John Partridge, the chairman of Imperial, you chaps on the management side are so good at planning and so good at accountancy and so good at figures, but you on the management side never have understood about the importance of winning the minds and hearts of men. We've been so much better at that in trades unions. What is our purpose which wins the minds and hearts of men, that persuades people to work hard? All right, there isn't any money in it. All right, you can earn as much money lying in bed as coming to work. But it's absolutely vital you should come to work. What is this purpose? This came home to me again so vividly on the shop floor. I remember at lunchtime on a Monday, we were discussing as managers the fact that there was a product we had to get off to Japan by midnight on the Wednesday, but it wouldn't be finished until the end of the day's shift on Wednesday. That meant persuading the crane driver to come into work late on overtime. So we were discussing this, but it is proper, consult before you decide. So down went the plant manager. He said to the crane driver, Charlie, can you come in late to drive the crane on overtime on Wednesday night for these reasons? And Charlie said, I'll drive the crane late for the company any night of the year except Wednesday, because on Wednesday it's my daughter's birthday. And I don't worry too much about what she will say to me if I don't go to her party, but I am concerned about what her mother will say to me for the rest of the night if I don't come to the party. So awfully sorry, can't come in Wednesday. Well, what are we going to do now? The academics say, of course, we should have 2 crane drivers. Sort of damned old silly thing they would say. The fact is we had 1 crane driver. We had 2 crane drivers in future, but at that moment we had 1 crane driver. And one of the excitements of industry and commerce, you have to deal with the problem you've got. So what do you do? So somebody said, well, throw the book at him. We've got an agreement with the union. It says reasonable overtime will be worked if 48 hours notice is given. We've just got it. Chuck the book at him. Somebody said even 20 years ago. In that case, he won't come in that day at all. Somebody said the other day he wouldn't come in that week nowadays. So somebody said, well, tell him then you'll get the overtime money. And somebody else said, he doesn't want the overtime money. If he wants money, he'll work on his own account that day and not pay tax, because that's how you earn money these days. Cash. So somebody said, well, why the devil should he come in now we come to think of it? Why should he miss his daughter's birthday party? Why should he? Somebody said, well, tell him it'll increase the profits of ICI if he does. Well, you tell him that. And you'll be there all night long when he's explaining to his wife at 11 o'clock at night that the reason why he went in was to increase the ICI profits, which was already 235 million. Which, if I may say so, is much too low and needs to be made much bigger for the future of our country. But it's a difficult economic point to put over at 11 o'clock at night in your wife's bedroom when you've just missed your daughter's birthday party. So in that case, why the devil should he come in? And this is the $64 question. And somebody said, well, tell him the truth. So they said, well, what's that? And they said, well, tell him if he doesn't come in, we'll miss the trip to Japan. And if we miss the trip to Japan, people in Japan will suffer. And since it's from pharmaceutical, more people will suffer. And since this is the 3rd time we've delivered late, next time they'll order from Germany. That means more unemployment on Teesside. That means less schools, and less hospitals, and less for the children, and less for the children's children. That's what it's about. Well, what is that common purpose? What is that thing one has summed up? I believe that common purpose is the creation of wealth, of worth, First of all, we create the goods and services. And it's no good, people saying, of the younger generation, I don't believe in the material world. At that point, I always say to them, well, will you now take your jeans off and say that again? How dare you sit there in jeans saying you don't believe in the material world when people sweated their guts out in Bolton sewing on those buttons and those zips? He didn't say man does not live by bread. He said man does not live by bread alone. That's right, that's right. But by golly, he lives by bread. The material things are crucial. And secondly, we create the jobs. We are the great job creators. I know we make 20 people redundant, but only to keep 300 people at work. And thirdly, we create the incomes which set men free. How much more wonderful than handouts? Not that handouts aren't absolutely necessary. Nobody who's lived in the 30s doesn't will realize that. And fourthly, we create reinvestment, replacing of what we have for future generations. And fifthly, we create a return on savings. And sixthly, we create exports, and that's what allows the children to buy Hong Kong vests in Littlewoods. And seventhly, we create tax, both pay as you earn and pay direct. And that's what pays for the teachers, and that's what pays for the schools, and that's what pays for the hospitals. That's what we create. And every time we don't give of our best, we fail to make the community a better place in which to live. People say, well, that's a difficult thing to put over. Well, here's the first reader there's ever been for 6-year-olds. Not that I'm proud my dad's a civil servant, or I'm proud my dad is a teacher, but I'm proud my dad works in a factory. This book has been described by the most left-wing educational press as either written by innocents or the most dangerous booklet published in 50 years. Listen to this. Dad's firm sells to 150 countries all over the world. It's exciting to think that people in Australia may be using a mixer which Dad helped to make. The firm has about 1,800 people working for it. They must have to sell a lot of mixing machines to pay 1,800 people every week. Good God, I thought it came from a celestial slush fund. What a thought that you've actually got to sell the machines to pay the employees. This is dangerous stuff for 6-year-olds. When we were back at school, our teacher told us they make thousands of mixers a day. Some of the money that the firm gets from selling the mixers is used to pay all the workers. Some is kept to buy new machinery and tools when the ones they use wear out. So you can explain reinvestment in words of one syllable. By Jove, the accountants ought to watch out, don't they? Some of the money is paid to the people who lent the money to the factory when it started. They're called shareholders. Some of the money is paid as tax to the government. Some more goes to the local council's rates. We asked our teacher what the money was used for. Building schools and paying teachers, she said. It's a pity they do that, I thought. The NUT have complained about that sentence. Then we tried to think of all the other things the money is used for. Building hospitals and paying nurses and doctors and policemen and for buses, paying for fire engines and firemen, parks and swimming pools. When I got home, my mum was making a sponge pudding with our mixer. I felt proud that Dad helped to make it. So this sense of this immense common purpose of the creation of worth can be put over simply. But I suspect the cause, if the cause is just, we need have no fear. But the cause alone is not enough. It's the bringing home to everybody who manages and supervises throughout the nation that the moment of justice. Nelson had is dead. Great power in the British people is to be brought back, called forth. That's not going to be done by the politicians who can be switched off for the two Ronnies. It's not going to be done by making laws. It's not going to be done by teachers, as these people are past teaching age. It's not going to be done by trades union leaders because people don't go to the meetings. It's not going to be done by priests because people don't go to church, although it's getting better, thank God. I suspect the people who are going to bring back the greatness to this nation are those of us who employ people, who manage people, as section leaders, as foremen, as middle managers, as senior managers. Because it's you and I that have people round us 35 to 40 hours a week. We have the ability to win men's minds and hearts as no one else does. If only we will do these practical things and never, ever give up hope.